Have you noticed? The harder you try to win an argument, the more you feel like you're losing yourself in it. You explain, you defend, you raise your voice. But the longer it goes, the more you see it, that blank, unreadable look in their eyes. They're not listening. They're loading their next shot. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're still trying to prove you're right, you've already lost. Not because your ideas are wrong, but because the very act of defending them means you've stepped into their trap. Winning an argument is not the same as having power. In fact, the people with the most power are often the ones who never enter the argument at all. So the real question isn't, how do I win? It's, why am I even playing this game? You've been here before. That meeting where you spoke up with a solid idea and someone cut you off mid-sentence. You tried to explain, to make them see your point, but by the time you finished, the room had already moved on. That late-night argument with someone you care about, you weren't trying to attack them. You just wanted them to understand how you feel. Instead, every word you spoke seemed to push them further away. Or that comment thread online. You typed out a thoughtful, reasoned reply. You hit send, and within minutes, you got a short, smug response that ignored everything you said but somehow made you feel like you'd been slapped. In each of those moments, you felt it, that tightness in your chest, that rush of heat in your face, the voice in your head saying, "They're not hearing me. I have to push harder." So you did. You explained more. You defended more. You raised your voice, sharpened your words, maybe even said things you didn't mean. But when it was over, you didn't feel like you'd won. You felt drained, hollow, wondering if they ever truly heard a single word you said. And here's the part no one likes to admit. Sometimes, the more we try to be understood, the less people actually listen. That's not bad luck. That's not just how people are. That's the way the game is designed. And in the next moment, I'm going to show you exactly what that game is and why the smartest move might be to stop playing entirely. The reason you never truly win these moments is because the game you think you're playing isn't the game that's actually being played. You think it's a debate about truth. They think it's a contest for control. And here's the twist. Control always beats truth. Think about it. When was the last time you saw someone stop mid-argument and say, "You know what? You're right. I've changed my mind"? Almost never. Not because people can't recognize the truth, but because admitting you're wrong feels like handing over your power. Arguments aren't intellectual duels. They're status games. Two identities circling each other, each trying to keep from being diminished. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more desperate you are to prove you're right, the more power you've already given away. You've stepped into their frame. You're following their rules. And once you accept their rules, you can only win the way they've defined winning. Which means, even if you win, you still lose. Nietzsche saw this more than a century ago. He understood that most people don't argue to discover truth. They argue to protect the fragile scaffolding of their identity. And if you threaten that structure, no amount of evidence will save you. They're not defending their point. They're defending themselves. This is why you can't beat someone into agreeing with you. The more you push, the harder they dig in. So, if you want to have any real power in these moments, the first step is to stop playing their game. In the next part, we'll strip away the illusion entirely, and I'll show you what's really happening in their mind the moment you start to argue. Here's what actually happens inside their mind when you start to argue. The moment you challenge someone's belief, you're not just questioning an idea, you're threatening a part of who they are. And the human brain treats that as a threat to survival. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up. Adrenaline spikes. The body prepares for a fight, just as if you'd stepped into their personal space. Psychologists call the next step reactance, the instinctive resistance we feel when someone tries to change us. The more you push, the more they pull away. It's like leaning against a door someone's holding shut. Your pressure only makes them push harder. Then, another process kicks in. Confirmation bias. Our built-in habit of seeking evidence that supports what we already believe and dismissing anything that doesn't. Once this happens, they're not listening to understand. They're listening to defend, which means every fact you give them isn't opening their mind. It's giving them new material to argue back with. Think about it. Has anyone ever thrown you a perfectly logical argument? And instead of changing your mind, you immediately started thinking of all the reasons they were wrong? That's confirmation bias in action. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where the harder you tried to explain yourself, the more the other person seemed to shut down? If yes, type "That's me" in the comments right now. Let's see how many of us have lived through this same frustration. Because here's the reality. By the time you're knee-deep in this back and forth, you're no longer exchanging ideas. You're locked in a mutual defense drill, each of you guarding the walls instead of opening the gates. And there's a reason this stalemate feels so exhausting. It's because you're fighting human nature itself. But there is a way to step out of this trap, and it starts with understanding why most people are playing a game they can never win. They're playing a game they can never win. But the truth is, they're not playing it by accident. Nietzsche had a name for this: herd morality, the value system of the crowd. It's the unspoken rule book that says, stay with the group, think like the group, defend the group. And the way the herd polices itself is through approval and disapproval. Every time you argue, you're not just defending your point, you're defending your standing in the group. You want to be seen as reasonable, intelligent, worthy of being listened to. Social psychology calls this social identity theory. Our sense of self is deeply tied to the groups we belong to. When that identity feels under attack, we instinctively move to protect it. This is why losing an argument feels so personal. It's not just, I was wrong. It's, I might not belong anymore. And in the herd's eyes, winning often has less to do with being right and more to do with showing loyalty to the group's worldview, which means you can win the debate and still lose status, or lose the debate and still be celebrated for your loyalty. Nietzsche saw this as a kind of invisible prison. When your sense of worth depends on the herd's approval, you're never truly free. But he also imagined a way out, a higher type of human who lives by their own values, not the crowd's. He called this the Übermensch, the overman. Not someone who dominates others, but someone who is untouchable by the herd's need for constant validation. The Übermensch doesn't argue to be accepted. He doesn't need to win the crowd's applause. His sense of worth comes from within, which is exactly why he can step away from pointless fights without feeling diminished. This is the direction we're heading. But before we get there, we need to talk about something far more practical. The hidden costs you're paying every time you step into a fight you don't need to be in. Every argument has a cost. And the most dangerous part is, those costs don't show up all at once. They drain you slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you've been paying far more than you ever won. The first cost is emotional. Every time you argue, you hand someone else the keys to your inner state. Your heart rate spikes. Your thoughts loop endlessly over what you should have said. You carry their words with you into the night, replaying the conversation instead of sleeping. The second cost is credibility. The more you argue, the more people begin to see you not as the one who makes strong points, but the one who always needs to be right. Your words lose weight because you've spent them too freely. The third cost is self-respect. Because each time you let someone drag you into their game, you show them and yourself that they can pull your strings. You traded your composure for a fleeting sense of victory. I once knew a man who was brilliant at his job. He could solve problems no one else could touch, but he argued constantly, in meetings, in emails, even over lunch. At first, people respected his knowledge, but over time, they stopped hearing his ideas. All they saw was the combat. Eventually, he wasn't invited to the important conversations anymore. He won so many arguments that he lost his place at the table entirely. That's the silent tragedy of endless fighting. You think you're proving your worth, but what you're really doing is eroding it. And this erosion happens quietly, day after day, until one day you realize you've won more arguments than you can count, and none of them made your life any better. Which is why the people with the most real influence aren't the ones who fight every battle. They're the ones who know exactly which battles are worth their time and which ones aren't worth touching at all. Most people think the ones who avoid arguments are afraid of losing. They assume silence equals weakness. But here's the truth. The real masters don't avoid arguments because they're scared of losing. They avoid them because they know even if they win, it's still a waste of their time. Every argument you enter comes with an opportunity cost. The hours you spend defending yourself are hours you're not building, creating, or moving forward. And here's what the masters understand. Power isn't proved by winning the fight. It's proved by deciding which fights are worth having. Picture a chess grandmaster. He doesn't chase every piece he can take. He focuses on the moves that shape the whole game. Now picture the amateur chasing every pawn, celebrating every capture, blind to the checkmate forming against him. That's the difference between the constant debater and the true strategist. The debater is addicted to the thrill of the exchange. The strategist is addicted to the outcome. And the outcome they want isn't to win this argument. It's to win the larger game of life. Nietzsche would call this the discipline of the Übermensch, the one who rises above the petty scrambles of the herd and directs his energy toward what actually matters. The Stoics called it self-mastery, the art of not being owned by your impulses, even the impulse to be right. When you understand this, you stop asking, how do I win this fight? And you start asking, why am I even in this fight? And here's where it gets exciting. You can use this exact mindset starting today to win without arguing, to influence without clashing, and to walk away without losing face. In the next part, I'll give you the exact playbook the masters use, the same one that lets them walk out of 90% of arguments stronger than when they walked in. Here's the playbook the masters use. Not to out-talk everyone, but to win without even stepping into the mud. The fastest way to lose an argument is to answer too quickly. Instant reactions are emotional reactions, and emotions are exactly what the other person wants to trigger. Scene. In a meeting, someone challenges your idea in front of the whole team. Instead of firing back, you pause. You take a slow sip of water. That silence feels like pressure to them. and it gives you the upper hand before you've even spoken. Questions are the Trojan horses of influence. Instead of telling them they're wrong, ask, what makes you believe that? How would you know if that turned out not to be true? Scene. In a family discussion, instead of debating point for point, you keep asking calm, open questions. They start doing the explaining and, in the process, expose the cracks in their own argument. Before you respond, figure out what's actually driving them. Is this about pride, fear, insecurity? Most arguments aren't about the stated topic at all. They're about an identity they're trying to protect. Scene. A friend insists you never listen. You realize it's not about this one conversation, it's about months of feeling ignored. You address the feeling, not just the accusation. When it's time to speak, make it count. 1 or 2 precise sentences can shift the entire dynamic, more than 10 minutes of back and forth. Scene. In a heated debate, you wait for the right moment and drop a single fact that's impossible to refute. Then you stop talking. The silence does the rest. Sometimes the most powerful move is to simply leave the game, not storming off, not sulking, calmly closing the conversation because you know there's nothing worth winning here. Nietzsche said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." You don't have to descend just to prove you can fight on their level. These strategies aren't about avoiding conflict out of fear. They're about protecting your time, your focus, and your power. And here's the part no one talks about. Sometimes silence is strength, and sometimes it's surrender. The difference between the two can decide whether you're the master of your presence or just another piece being quietly removed from the board. Not all silence is strength. In fact, some silence is far more dangerous than open defeat. It's called disguised surrender, the kind that convinces you you've won simply because you didn't fight. You tell yourself, "I'm being the bigger person," but deep down, you know the real reason. "I'm afraid of what will happen if I speak." Strategic silence is active. It's charged with intention. Surrendered silence is hollow. It's the absence of courage. And from the outside, they can look exactly the same. This is how so many people spend years, even decades, thinking they're wise and patient, when in reality, they've simply trained themselves to disappear. Nietzsche called this the morality of the herd, a survival code for those who stay safe by never standing out, never resisting, never taking up space. You've probably felt it, biting your tongue when you knew you should have spoken, calling it keeping the peace, when really you were just avoiding conflict, telling yourself it's not worth it, when what you meant was, "I don't think I can win." Psychology has a name for what happens if you live like this for too long. Learned helplessness. It's when you stop resisting, not because the threat is gone, but because you've convinced yourself resistance is pointless. And the more you live here, the smaller your life becomes. You stop asking for what you need. You stop defending what you value. And eventually, you stop believing you deserve it in the first place. This isn't strength. This is self-erasure. Every time you swallow your words out of fear, you're teaching the world how to treat you. And the lesson you're giving is, you can take what you want from me. I won't stop you. That's the danger of surrendered silence. It doesn't protect you. It erases you. So before you tell yourself, "I'm choosing not to engage," stop and ask, am I silent because I'm strong or because I'm scared? Your answer to that question will tell you everything about whether your silence is a weapon or a cage. And if you want it to be a weapon, there's one final shift you have to make, one that Nietzsche, the Stoics, and modern psychology all agree on. It's the shift from protecting yourself to owning yourself. And that's what we'll talk about next. From protecting yourself to owning yourself. This is where Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch comes alive. The Übermensch, the overman, isn't just a stronger version of the average person. He is someone who has stepped outside the invisible rules of the herd. He no longer lives to win the herd's approval, nor fears its disapproval. He doesn't measure his worth by victories in other people's games. His worth comes from the fact that he decides which games exist for him at all. And here's the key. The Übermensch can stand silent because he knows he could speak. He can walk away because he knows he could stay and win. His silence is not emptiness. It's presence so rooted in his own values that no outside noise can shake it. Psychology calls this the pinnacle of self-regulation, the ability to manage your impulses so completely that no one can bait you into a reaction you didn't choose. Imagine living like that. Every yes is intentional. Every no is rooted in clarity. Every silence is a statement of strength, not fear. But here's the problem most people face. They don't know when their silence is power and when it's self-betrayal. So, let's close that gap. The 3 rules of powerful silence. 1. If speaking is only to defend your ego, stay silent. Defending your worth to someone determined not to see it is a tax you don't owe. 2. If silence protects your core values, hold it. Sometimes the strongest statement is to keep your focus on the work, the vision, the life that matters to you. 3. If speaking can change the outcome for the better, speak, and speak with precision. Don't fill the air. Aim for one sentence that shifts the entire frame. This is the balance the Übermensch lives by. He is not passive. He is not reactive. He is selective, the master of when to be still and when to strike. Because true power isn't in always speaking, and it isn't in always staying silent. True power is in choosing and knowing you could do either from a place of absolute strength. And when you start living by that choice, you stop playing the endless game of proving yourself. You don't just protect yourself anymore. You own yourself. You own yourself. And now, it's time to claim it. If you're ready to stop letting other people choose your battles, if you're done proving your worth in games that don't matter, then say it out loud to yourself, and then write it in the comments right now. I choose the silence of strength. Not for me, not for anyone else, but so that you see it in your own words, as a promise to yourself that from this moment on, your silence will be chosen, not forced. And when you write it, you'll see others who've written it too. You'll realize you're not alone in this, that there's a community of people choosing the same path. That's the power of making it public. It stops being a thought in your head and starts being a truth you live. So, if this spoke to you, if it gave you clarity, if it reminded you of your own strength, then hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Not just to support this channel, but to keep reminding yourself that you've chosen a different way to live. Remember, the loudest voice in the room isn't always the most powerful. Sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that doesn't need to speak at all.